Evil does not always arrive in the ways we expect. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as an accident, hidden beneath confusion and grief. On June 25, 2022, a frantic 911 call came from Cleveland, Ohio. A 13-week-old infant was unresponsive, and his family was desperate for help. But what began as a call for medical assistance would quickly become a criminal investigation. Doctors and investigators uncovered a troubling discovery, a discovery that raised questions about the truth, about responsibility, and about whether this tragedy was an accident at all. This is the story of Traveon Hughes Sr., a young father whose infant son was found with a baby wipe lodged in his throat. It is a story of panic, suspicion, interrogation, trial, and a final verdict that shocked many. At 7:37 a.m., emergency dispatchers in Cleveland answered a chaotic and emotional call. The caller shouted that the baby could not breathe. In the background, multiple voices overlapped, some shouting, some crying, making it difficult for the dispatcher to understand what was happening. The dispatcher repeatedly tried to get one person to explain the emergency clearly. Eventually, a woman took control of the phone and reported that a neighbor had banged on her door, saying his son had stopped breathing. The dispatcher guided her through life-saving steps. She instructed her to cover the baby's mouth and nose and give 2 small puffs of air. For several minutes, CPR and rescue breathing were attempted while paramedics rushed to the scene. But every second counted. And with 9 minutes passing before emergency personnel arrived, the baby's chance of survival grew smaller with each tick of the clock. When paramedics reached the home, the fight to save the child continued. But what they discovered during their efforts would transform a medical emergency into a possible crime. The baby was transported to Metro Health Medical Center. Despite the efforts of doctors and paramedics, it was too late. The 13-week-old infant was pronounced dead, but during life-saving attempts, something unusual was found lodged in the infant's throat. It was not food. It was not a small toy. It was a baby wipe. The wipe, stained with blood, had been tightly lodged in the airway. Doctors realized immediately that this was not a normal obstruction. A baby so young did not have the ability or dexterity to place such an item in his throat. Social workers at the hospital immediately notified police, requesting homicide detectives. What had begun as a tragic choking incident was now being investigated as a suspicious death. But how did a baby wipe end up inside the throat of a 3-month-old? That was the question police now had to answer. Police began their inquiry by speaking to the infant's parents, 18-year-old Traveon Hughes Sr. and 18-year-old Asphyxiation McCowan. They also interviewed Traveon's brother, Traveon, and Travion's girlfriend, Cassandra, who had attempted CPR during the frantic moments before paramedics arrived. When asked who was home at the time, the family confirmed that both parents and other adults were present. However, the child's mother, Asphyxiation, explained that she had already left for work that morning. The baby was in the care of his father, Traveon. Investigators separated the parents to take individual statements. Asphyxiation explained that before she left for work, the baby was awake and alert. She had picked him up, kissed him, and placed him back in his bassinet. Shortly after, she left the home. Traveon was now the only parent left to care for the child. What Traveon described next would become the focus of investigators' suspicions, because his story did not explain how the baby wipe could have become a deadly obstruction. Traveon told police that the baby began crying after his mother left. He said he made a bottle, but explained that his son often choked during feedings because he was greedy and premature. He described trying to feed the child, pulling the bottle away when he choked, burping him, and then returning the bottle. He also claimed he placed a baby wipe under the child's chin to wipe away milk as it dripped. Traveon said he briefly left the room, and when he returned, the baby was choking. He claimed he tried to remove the obstruction with his fingers, but struggled because his hands were too large. He said the wipe was slippery and difficult to grab. In a panic, Traveon ran to get help from his brother, Traveon, and Cassandra. They attempted to clear the airway and performed CPR, while Cassandra called 911. But according to paramedics, no one at the scene told them about the baby wipe when they arrived. Why had no one mentioned the wipe during the frantic call to 911? And why did paramedics only discover it later at the hospital? Investigators reviewed the 911 call. At the very start, a male voice could be heard shouting that something was in the baby's mouth. Yet during the guided CPR instructions, when asked if anything was visible in the mouth, Cassandra said, "No. At the hospital, paramedics stated they had not been informed of any obstruction. To them, it was clear the baby was unresponsive, but they had no knowledge of the wipe." This contradiction puzzled detectives. If Traveon had told his brother and Cassandra about the wipe, why had no one mentioned it on the phone with dispatch or to the paramedics? The silence raised suspicions. Investigators now had to consider the most unsettling possibility. Was this truly an accident, or had the baby wipe been placed there intentionally? At the house, police secured the property as a crime scene. Detectives walked through the rooms, trying to piece together the last moments of the infant's life. Cassandra told investigators she was focused only on CPR and following the dispatcher's instructions. She admitted Traveon had told her the baby was choking on a wipe, but she claimed she never actually saw it. Traveon insisted he had tried to remove the wipe but failed. He continued to maintain that the baby had accidentally choked, but when investigators asked about blood found on the wipe, Cassandra recalled Traveon saying he had wiped a small scratch on the baby's neck earlier. Later, however, she denied ever mentioning blood at all, creating further confusion. With conflicting stories and unanswered questions, detectives made a critical decision. They brought both Traveon and Cassandra in for further questioning. During questioning, Cassandra repeated that Traveon had come running in, saying the baby was choking. She admitted he told her it was a wipe, but she did not see it. She focused only on compressions and rescue breaths. Detectives pressed her about why she had not mentioned the wipe during the 911 call. Cassandra grew frustrated, insisting she had done everything she could to save the baby. Traveon's second interview began with little cooperation. Almost immediately, he refused to speak without a lawyer present. Detectives informed him he was under arrest for murder, manslaughter, and child endangerment. Traveon appeared stunned. He insisted he was innocent and expressed anger, claiming he had tried to save his son. But medical experts were clear. A 13-week-old baby could not have placed a wipe that deep into his own throat. The Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office conducted the autopsy. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxia by choking. Forensic pathologists concluded the wipe had been placed intentionally. At 3 months old, the baby did not have the strength, dexterity, or coordination to roll, pick up a wipe, fold it, and lodge it into his throat. The pathologist's testimony would later become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. With medical science ruling out accident, the case against Traveon Hughes Sr. moved forward to trial. Traveon Hughes Sr. entered a plea of not guilty. His defense argued that there was not enough evidence to prove he had intentionally placed the wipe in his son's throat. They pointed to the chaotic 911 call, the efforts at CPR, and Traveon's insistence that he had tried to help. But prosecutors presented the medical examiner's findings. They argued that only an adult could have forced the wipe into the baby's airway. Traveon's partner, Asphyxiation, testified during the trial. She told the court she had been on FaceTime with Traveon that morning. She said she saw him pick up the baby and run out of the room, shouting that the baby was choking. Tests on the wipe revealed the baby's DNA but not Traveon's still. Prosecutors argued the absence of DNA did not prove innocence. In May 2024, the jury delivered its verdict. Traveon Hughes Sr. was found guilty of murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. The sentence would ensure Traveon faced the consequences of what the court determined was no accident. The judge sentenced Traveon Hughes Sr. to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. During sentencing, Asphyxiation defended Traveon, telling the court the judge was making a mistake. But the court stood by the jury's decision. An appeal was filed, arguing there was not enough evidence to prove intent. But the appeals court rejected the claims, upholding the conviction. In prison phone calls, Traveon and Asphyxiation could be heard speaking to one another. They had another child together during this time, and their conversations revealed moments of tenderness despite the devastating outcome. but the facts remained. A baby wipe had been found deep in the throat of a 3-month-old child. Medical experts agreed it could not have been self-inflicted. And for that, Traveon Hughes Sr. would spend at least 15 years behind bars. The case leaves behind painful questions. Why did no one mention the wipe clearly to dispatchers or paramedics? Was the silence intentional or the result of panic? Could there have been another explanation? Or was this truly an act of deliberate harm? The jury reached its conclusion. But for those who knew the infant, and for those who continue to study the case, the tragedy remains haunting. A child's life was lost, and a young father was convicted of ending it. In Cleveland, the baby wipe case will forever stand as a reminder that even the smallest details can change everything, and that sometimes what seems like an accident may hide a darker truth.